Link. Okay.
Welcome back to another broadcast of the Pro Football Central Falcon Central Radio podcast. I'm Scott Karasik. I'm joined by Aaron Freeman and our Green Bay Packers analyst from Bleacher Report. He also is an NFL draft analyst for a couple different sites, Optimum Scouting, Draft Breakdown, and I forget the third off the top of my head, but Justis Mosqueda. He knows a good bit about the current Falcons, and he's a huge Rashid Hageman fan.
So. You can say that, I guess. Nice to be on, guys.
All right, so we're going to open this one up. We're talking a little bit about the Cardinals game. I don't know if you watched any of it, but I figured you might have since you like to kind of get an idea of the team. Positives, Aaron. Since we're trying to be more positive on this show after bitching for the first 8 weeks of the season, Julio Jones.
Yep, he wrecked Patrick Peterson. It's pretty positive.
I mean, there's really not much more to say than that. Like, 11 catches on 12 targets, something crazy like that. Julio just had a monster game. I've never seen. I think Julio Jones might have had his best game of his career outside of that 2012 NFC Championship game.
Okay, I was about to say.
Like, outside of that game where he just burned Deshaun Golston all day, I think he had his best game burning a guy who's claiming to be the best corner in the NFL, which leads me to this argument. Maybe Desmond Trufant is not the best, but in the conversation. He's in the top 5, top 3, that range.
Okay.
I still think Reeves is up there. Because I know, Peterson's put on an island, but, he's burned a lot. I don't really see Reeves getting burned at least at the same rate that Peterson is at this point.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's Reeves, I think it's Sherman, Reeves, Sherman, and then Trufant are the top 3 for me.
Don't forget
I don't
Brent
think
Grimes.
Reeves is better than Trufant.
Don't forget Brent Grimes.
He's down there at like 6th or 7th, despite what his wife might want you to think.
Oh, good old Miko Grimes. All right, so other positives from the game. Gotta admit this, Scott. Harry Douglas was kind of okay. It's kind of, just a little bit.
That's like the nicest thing he'll ever verbally say about Harry Douglas. Aaron Freeman hates Harry Douglas.
Just he's overrated, but
Like,
he's the Brandon Jones of the Falcons.
Do you hate him more than Andrew Parsons? I mean, Andrew Parsons just randomly at 2 a.m. on a Tuesday fire off some tweet about how Harry Douglas just needed to stay balanced and they would have gotten a Super Bowl. I feel like it haunts Andrew Parsons.
It does.
I don't know. It's a tough one between me and Andrew. I'll give Andrew I'll say Andrew is number 1. I'll be 1A, 1B, or whatever. So, yeah.
All I'm gonna say is, I love putting out stats like the Falcons are 5-3 with Harry Douglas playing the whole game, but 0-4 without him, because Aaron hates him so much. But he might be a big part to this team.
It's the most unimpressive 100-yard game you'll ever see is a Harry Douglas 100-yard game. It's basically just, rub routes, zone coverage. I don't know what Todd Bowles was thinking. He has Antonio Cromartie covering Harry Douglas. He's not asking him to jam him at the line of scrimmage. He's playing off and stuff. So it's like, okay, I guess if you're going to get a 6'3" corner against a 5'11" and 3/4 wide receiver and not ask him to press, okay, we'll take that, and that's why the Cardinals lost.
And Devin Hester dropping 3 balls, that was ridiculous. Love Hester, what he's done this year, but, 2 drops. Wide open in coverage, 2 drops.
Yeah, touchdown was, if he catches that touchdown and doesn't get flagged for that face mask on the punt return, this game was going to be an absolute blowout.
Green Bay had one of those too with Devontae Adams. He had that little slant that he could have caught easily for a touchdown, and they ended up going 0 for 4 every single time they went in the red zone, at least for touchdowns. They just got field goals every single time. That game on paper that the Packers had against the Patriots, like every single statistic leans in the way of Green Bay just beating them by multiple scores, except for red zone efficiency. They just couldn't get it done once they got into the red zone. They just a couple plays like that Devontae Adams trap and stuff like that just ended up killing them a little bit.
Well, I hope that happens again this week. Outside of time and possession, I hope Atlanta has a similar game, because I hope Atlanta can get another 35-minute time of possession. I think that's how they beat Green Bay, by running the ball, keeping the clock. Because your run defense hasn't been so stellar this year.
No, this run defense is still bad. I mean, when you look at who they're playing at nose tackle, I mean, it's like LaTroy Guion and, Pennell, who's an undrafted rookie, and he played at Colorado State Pueblo last year. They really don't have – they were really just banking on that B.J. Raji was going to be their, run stopper. I mean, that's an undersized, defense on the line. I mean, you have Dayton Jones, who's probably still around like 285, 280, and then you have Mike Daniels, who isn't very big at all. And those are two of the 3 most rotated defensive linemen on that team. So really, like, when you play base against them, you just kind of look at that interior. I always talk about the interior triangle of that defense, right? So you have the 2 inside linebackers and the nose tackle. That might have been one of the weakest in the league when they had Brad Jones and A.J. Hawk starting. I mean, they've now put Barrington at strong inside linebacker, and they have Clay Matthews playing weak inside linebacker for the past, I want to say, like 4 or 5 weeks. And they've looked better now. But it's hard to tell what exactly this team's going to do with their inside linebacker unit, game to game. They just keep rotating it over and over again.
To be fair, I don't think you can exactly call LaTroy Guion a real, how do I put this, a real run-stuffing nose tackle at 303 pounds when the Falcons are going to put out a center who weighs 300 pounds and a guard who weighs 310, and flank him with another guard who weighs 330. Like, Atlanta's line is pretty beefy compared to Green Bay's front seven, which kind of leads me to this question of, do you think Atlanta could legitimately run on Green Bay provided Steven Jackson doesn't look like old, slow, plodding Steven Jackson?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I mean, Dayton Jones has done decent as a pass rusher. He can create interior pressure. Really, the only guy that I would say is like actually a good run defender is Mike Daniels, and even then he's undersized. I mean, he's like a 6-foot defensive tackle, under tackle basically, and the way they use him in Green Bay. I think any team in the league can run on Green Bay, frankly, but we haven't really seen the inside linebacker unit that the Packers are putting out now mesh. Like, if Brad Jones and A.J. Hawk were out there, I mean, teams would just target them every single time and just, hit them up the middle. But now that Matthews is in there, and now Sam Barrington is, able to take on blocks, and when he's free, he's able to close in on guys. Teams have shied away from that a little bit. I was actually super surprised that the Patriots just didn't run it down the gut of the Packers on Sunday. I mean, I really thought that, Blunt and all those guys were going to be able to run through him. I mean, Blunt had a huge game against Green Bay, even back when he played with Tampa. Really, the two issues you have with Green Bay, I mean, they can cover. They're decent at tackling, and they can get after the passer. What they really can't do is cover tight ends, and they can't stop the run. And, looking at the Patriots' offense, I mean, I just thought that they were just going to gut him with the running game, and they were going to gut him with Gronkowski, but they really didn't do that until, later in the game. They just decided to pass to LaFell and stuff like that, which is interesting to me.
I don't understand why the Falcons don't attack them more with don't try to attack them more with Toilolo. I understand Toilolo's been a disappointment this year, even from my not so lofty, or at least I felt they weren't so lofty standards that I set for him, of 40 catches, 400 yards, and 6-7 touchdowns. I didn't feel like that was that lofty, but he has gotten a little better recently. I just don't see him stretching the middle of the field with Toilolo, and I think they should. Do you think that he would have a decent matchup against Matthews or Barrington on the inside of that defense?
I could see it with Barrington. Barrington, on paper isn't very athletic. He apparently had the flu when he was running at the combine, though, so that's a little different. But, I mean, Matthews is good in space. Matthews can cover someone. They had him split out against a receiver a couple times earlier this season, and he held his own. But Barrington is definitely, green. You can see it. He's not very strong at the point of attack either when he's forced to move to the point of attack and, fill gaps and things like that. He got absolutely destroyed twice against New England, just pancaked right when he, entered the hole on kickouts by offensive linemen. He doesn't have his balance correct, and, that shows up in coverage, too. I mean, he's definitely still, the young second-year guy who was a seventh-round pick. I mean, he plays like who he is, but who he is better than the options that Green Bay had before him.
That's fair enough.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting because I do think, I did see Kyle Rudolph and Gronk, get open against the Packers linebackers. And I think the Falcons, if they try to target Toilolo and ask him to try to stretch that seam and try to attack the safeties, I think, the Falcons could get some favorable matchups, but we'll see what they do. Last week was the first time they threw to their 6'8" tight end in the red zone. It was we've been waiting 12 weeks for y'all to throw him a red zone target, and it seemed to work. But, we'll see what the Falcons can do if they can kind of get him going these last couple of weeks. So, Justis, all right, we talked a little bit about Julio breaking out. It seems like the Packers will probably have Sam Shields on him. Do you think they will learn from Todd Bowles' mistake and give Sam Shields all the safety help he needs?
The way Green Bay plays defense is really weird. It's almost similar to Saban's, Rip Liz concepts at Bama. So, I mean, I could see it, but they have enough confidence in these tall guys that can run that they really don't help them that much. I mean, when they played against Chicago and stuff, really these cornerbacks, I mean, so how they use them is on nickel, they'll have Devon House as the boundary cornerback, and they'll move Tramon Williams from the boundary into the slot because Devon House is taller. Really, Devon House and Sam Shields are able to win at the catch point a lot more than you think against guys like Alshon Jeffrey, Megatron, guys like that. So I don't know how much they'll help them, but if they need to, I mean, Clinton Dix hasn't been playing poorly, and when he has been playing poorly, it hasn't been because of blown assignments. It's because he's not able to tackle these full-grown men yet.
All right. That'll be interesting. I mean, because basically the Falcons' offense, the weeks where they've gotten Julio involved right from the start, week 3 against the Buccaneers, they blew the doors off of them. And then last week they just kind of completely overwhelmed Arizona. And so basically, if any team's game plan is, it's you got to keep Julio contained for as long as possible. The Saints tried it in week 1, and they did a pretty good job for the first half of the game, and then he went off in the second half, and that's why the Falcons ended up coming back and winning. And so basically, even though Harry Douglas and Roddy White have had productive games over the last couple of weeks, a lot of what they've been doing has been, beating the zone coverage that the teams are giving them because they're, doubling Julio on the opposite side of the field. So Julio is opening up a lot of opportunities for those guys. And so it's going to be interesting to see if the Falcons will find ways to get Julio the ball early, because over the last couple of weeks, and they kind of changed it the last 2 weeks because it completely screwed them over. Their way of getting Julio the ball was just throwing the same old wide receiver screen to him that pretty much every team had figured out and was basically stopping. Carolina pretty much completely shut that down. So they haven't really run it since that game, but it'll be interesting to see if the Falcons sort of, figure out different ways of getting Julio the ball. They did last week, and it really worked.
And one thing that I'd say about Sam Shields, is he's actually really bad about his discipline. He kind of cheats with his eyes. if you go back to the Chicago game, I mean, they basically have they had Jeffrey run, in a little orbit, right? Orbit motion. And Shields ended up way out there on the sideline when Jeffrey cut back because, I mean, this dude's just peeking in the backfield all the time. And he's really bad at covering, double moves, actually. Like, if your offensive line has enough time to throw a double move, you could burn Shields deep. I mean, every single time that, that teams are effectively able to do that, he just kind of gets destroyed. But the issue is just Green Bay sends so many of these pass rushers over and over again. It just kind of wears out your offensive line.
Speaking of which, the Falcons' offensive line has really started to gel the past 2 or 3 weeks when it comes to holding up pass rushers. They still allow, a sack or a hit here or there, but they've gone from a team that was allowing 19, 20 pressures a game to a team that allows in the low double digits, 11, 12. Their worst game in the past few weeks was against Carolina, who, in a divisional matchup, that's pretty standard for Carolina. But they held up well against Detroit. They held up well against Tampa Bay. They held up well against Cleveland, and they held up well against Arizona, all teams that had pass rushers that had been kind of coming on and doing well the previous few games. So do you think Atlanta's pass blocking with that combination of Matthews and Blaylock and Stone and Asamoah and Schrader all kind of finally gelling will be able to help stop that Green Bay pass rush?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't count it out. I mean, definitely there's been some streaks for this team. Who it really depends on is Mike Daniels, actually. Peppers is kind of, Peppers has probably been the most consistent edge rusher, but even then he's been up and down. I mean, Clay Matthews was like 8 weeks in and had like a half a sack or something at one point in the season. Nick Perry, Mike Neal are rotating at the outside linebacker spot now that Clay Matthews is playing inside linebacker. Dayton Jones, I think, is only playing like 30% of the snaps. I think he's only started 3 of the games this season on the defensive line, and he's, the other, penetrating defensive lineman on this team besides Mike Daniels. It's really built off of that interior pressure that Mike Daniels has. So, I mean, if you guys have, you were saying that, you have a 330-pounder and, all those that, interior offensive line. I mean, if you could shut down, Mike Daniels for a bit, you could survive. That's not an issue.
See, I think Justin Blaylock and John Asamoah are going to do. They've been Atlanta's best pass blockers all year, and they've been really underrated as guards because a lot of people like to talk about, the Marshall Yandas, the Kelechi Osemele's, the ridiculous year that Bitonio's having for Cleveland, but they don't really look at Blaylock or Asamoah as these excellent pass protectors when they've combined all year allowed a total of 3 sacks.
That's fair enough. I mean, just stop that interior pressure. I've always said interior pressure is harder to play against than, edge rushers because, I mean, when you really think about it, I mean, you have an edge rusher coming out. I mean, you can step up in the pocket. If you have an interior, pass rusher coming at your face, I mean, you either have to, like, completely bail and, like, contort your body in a way that you can't get this pass off, or you're either, you're going to have to stay, stand in the pocket, take this shot, or you're going to have to throw a little fadeaway. So I think when you have a dude breathing down, your neck, it's way harder than just, being able to, ole and just, like, step up and let a guy pass by you.
That's why
this team's built, like, around Daniels.
That's why I'm not scared of LaTroy Guion, because he's been mediocre as a pass rusher this year, but right. Mike Daniels has been massive. Dayton's had a good year. I don't understand why he doesn't play more snaps, but Dayton's had a good year.
They just worry about him in the run game, man. I'm telling you. He'll penetrate, and when he makes plays in the run game, it's behind the line of scrimmage, but he can just get destroyed at the point of attack, man. Like someone that I know in the organization was telling me that at the end of the year last year, Dayton Jones was actually lighter. He was lighter than what he showed up at the combine as. And at the combine, he was still that undersized guy where people were thinking, oh, okay, maybe he's going to play base end in the 4-3, you know? He just can't hold that weight on him yet. And, I mean, it's an issue, and Daniels is undersized too, so I guess you can't say, like, you absolutely need to be this size, because Daniels is playing perfectly fine in sort of that same role as an undersized guy. But, I mean, man, you just really, you see it in certain aspects this season, which is better than last season when he was just absolutely getting destroyed. But going into 2015, I mean, you definitely want to see more from a guy that you picked, I think, 21st overall.
True. So here's a question for you. Desmond Trufant, I've been singing his praises. He's got a real matchup this week in Jordy Nelson. Do you think Trufant versus Nelson will be a fun one to watch in terms of Falcons side or in terms of the Green Bay side?
Oh, man. The thing is, like, you can't really stop Nelson. Like, no one's really stopped Nelson yet. That's the one thing is, like, even against Seattle and even against the Patriots, I mean, they haven't really shut him down. You know what I mean? The problem is there's just too many damn options that you can't lean on all your help onto okay, we're gonna put a top over Nelson. That's how the Patriots allowed like three of the Packers' explosive plays through the air in the first half. It was just that they're like, okay, we're gonna play cover one, but it was like they were playing like half field cover two. You know what I mean? They just had their one high safety just shading over to Nelson so hard that they just abused the other side of the field with Cobb and Devontae Adams, and then they started playing one high balanced again, and then Nelson they ran a little slant arrow concept, right? And Nelson just beat his man, man-to-man coverage, had that inside leverage on the inside breaking slant, and ended up taking it, I think, 35 yards after the catch for a touchdown. I mean, he burned Revis. Like, I don't know. I mean, Nelson's really good for a player who's never made a Pro Bowl before. Like, he just doesn't really, like, fade away. There's no game where he's invisible.
I think he hasn't made a Pro Bowl because people don't think he's that fast.
It's amazing. I actually wrote an article at the beginning of the season comparing his numbers to like every Pro Bowler who's ever made it, and it's like the fact that he hasn't made the Pro Bowl with the statistics that he's been able to put up is like actually insane. Like his numbers are comparable to like it's something like no receiver has been like top 10 in yardage and touchdowns twice ever and not made it to the Pro Bowl like within a certain amount of time. And Nelson did it like 3 times. So it was like, not only did he make precedent, he made precedent by double.
He should definitely go this year.
Yeah, I think him and Cobb will make it, and then Cobb will go to Oakland and sign like a $100 million contract.
But the difference is Cobb is actually worth the money.
Yeah. Cobb is so fast. He's insane.
Unlike another receiver who went to Oakland, I think the last name was Walker, and he failed.
Well, you know what? James Jones is doing a little bit better than Javon Walker did.
Not much better.
I mean, yeah. It's weird. I'll go through the Derek Carr box score every once in a while, and you'll just see like 6-yard pass, 6-yard pass, 7-yard pass, 4-yard pass, 3-yard pass, 6-yard pass, and then all of a sudden it'll be like 54 yards to James Jones. And then he'll just have like one of those a game, and then everything else that like Derek Carr throws is just the shortest routes in the entire world.
Well, it's because he doesn't trust any of his receivers deep yet.
I mean, would you?
Considering who he's got, no.
Oh man, him to Cobb and to James Jones is gonna be fun next year. I just feel like it's gonna happen. Like I don't know if Vegas has props for free agents, but if I'm able to put money on Randall Cobb going to Oakland. Man, I'm either going to lose a bunch of money like I did when I put money on New England covering last week, or I'm going to be super happy.
No.
All right. So, speaking of Cobb, he's the guy that really gives me a lot of nightmares about the Falcons matching up because just basically the Packers move him around all the time. They line him up in the backfield. He's in the slot. He's outside. He's doing all this stuff, and basically it's just whenever he gets a favorable matchup against a linebacker or a slow safety, which the Falcons probably have plenty of, or at least slow compared to Randall Cobb. It pretty much it's like a 20-yard play, 30-yard play. And so I just, is there any way that he can be stopped, Justice? Can you give me any hope?
Yeah, earlier in the season he was actually slowed down a bunch. Part of that, though, was that Davante Adams wasn't really their third receiver. Davante Adams was their fourth guy, and they had Jared Boykin, and people were just like, okay, throw it to Jared Boykin then. We'll just, overcompensate everything else. And, if you're going to beat us with Jared Boykin, you're going to beat us with Jared Boykin. But you're right. I mean, Cobb now is playing a lot of wide because Adams is playing on the boundary. He's lining up in the backfield with Lacey. Sunday, he lined up in the backfield by himself and ran that little wheel route that he got a 33-yarder on as a running back. He kind of plays everywhere, but usually he's playing slot. Really, I mean, you just got to pick your poison with these receivers, right? There's three really good ones. Davante Adams is going to have the best, rookie year that anyone's ever had with Aaron Rodgers. Which is saying something considering the guys that, Aaron Rodgers has had and, how soon they've been able to, the James Jones, the Greg Jennings, the Jordy Nelson, the Randall Cobb, just, how these guys just bust out of nowhere. And Adams is going to have the quickest start of all of them, and he didn't even start the season as a third receiver. So I guess you just kind of have to decide which guys you want to cover, right? You have to overcompensate in some ways, and in some ways, you're going to lose a little bit.
See, that's where getting Robert Alford back this week will be nice because I think he's got the speed that if you say, hey, this guy, you go match up with Randall Cobb, you've got the speed to. I think Alford can do it. I think Trufant's got the speed to match up with Jordy Nelson. Because he's a little bit slower than Randall Cobb, but not much slower. Just like Trufant's a little bit slower than Robert Alford, but not much slower. That leaves Davante Adams with a cover one shell and Robert McClain or Josh Wilson or somebody there. But that's the one I'm worried about is Davante Adams more than anybody else.
Well, really, before even this week, I think his biggest game was like 55 yards. He cracked over 50 yards like twice this season, but he had like 100 plus, on Sunday. Where, New England was just like, all right, we're going to try to shut you down with Revis here. We're going to shut you down with Browner here. And they were just like, all right, I guess we're going to go to Adams the entire game. It just happens. And then they had their high safety shading over towards Nelson because they just looked like they were frightened, absolutely just petrified by the ability that Nelson was able to display at sometimes. Just keep pitching it to Davante Adams. I mean, he could have had an even bigger day if he didn't drop that touchdown catch and stuff.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why pretty much you can plug and play with Packers receivers is because Rodgers just does a great job of buying time for his guys by extending the pocket and basically, even a guy like Harry Douglas, if you give him 8 seconds to get open, he can get open in 8 seconds because guys can't cover forever. And so a lot of the Packers' big plays, it seems to come in. It seems like Jordy Nelson gets that 180-yard touchdown every game because Rodgers rolls out the pocket and then just flings it downfield. And Jordy Nelson somehow got behind the safety. And it seems like a lot of their big plays come from that. And, the key to stopping that is the Falcons getting pressure. And it was good to see the Falcons get pressure last week against the Cardinals, but they played against a really bad offensive line, a really bad interior, even, to the point that Cliff Matthews was beasting, Paul Faneca and stuff like that. And against the Packers, they're going up against arguably the two best pass-protecting guards in the league in Sitton and Lang. So it's going to be interesting to see if the Falcons actually can, get some pressure against a good offensive line for once this year.
Yeah, I agree. And, the way you beat Rodgers is allowing him to be aggressive, allowing him to extend plays, or, not allowing him to extend plays, but, he'll bust out of the pocket, what he sees things aren't going well, and he's gonna hold on to that ball, waiting for that thing to get open. So really, like, if you look at when he takes sacks and when the Packers lose, there's definitely a correlation there. This is the first time that he hasn't really had a hole in the offensive line. I think Pro Football Focus ranked him as like the 8th best offensive line in the league, like in October or something. The thing is, they outside of Sitton, who obviously is great, they really don't have another great player on that offensive line. But what they don't have is a terrible player, which is something that, unfortunately for Rodgers, he hasn't been able to say that in his previous years. And I think now he's on pace to have like 36 sacks or something an entire season, and he's never played a full season where he hasn't been sacked like 50 times in his career. So it definitely helps him, especially since, like you said, he's a late in the down receiver. And, Nelson definitely does, know how to break off these routes. I believe the first explosive play against the Patriots was like that, where, they just couldn't get a pass rush the entire damn game. I mean, they were really missing Chandler Jones. And, Rodgers could just kind of bailed out of the pocket. Nelson kind of followed him on a little, like, flag route and, just busted off that play. Just a huge gain. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it just seems like once the game it'll happen, Rodgers will just, dart out of the pocket and, just find Nelson deep because, he broke on his route and ended up reading the defense and found space. Y'all can't do what New England did, where Rodgers, like, actually had 12 seconds to throw a pass. Like, don't do that. I wouldn't advise that at all.
I'll pass that on.
My thought as well. I think Mike Nolan should continue his expansive blitz concepts with safeties coming off the edge and all that he did against the Cardinals, because it seemed to work pretty well. But it only works when they can get interior pressure. How has T.J. Lang and what's the other guy? Josh Sitton. How have they looked this year?
So the thing is, they've actually, they've done well. What messes up the Packers as far as like interior pressure goes is Corey Linsley, their rookie center, who was a 5th-round pick out of the Ohio State University. What happens is, like, if you get a stunt, like, he can just get destroyed. I mean, he had one play against the Patriots last week where someone just had a stunt on him, and he just let the dude run past. Like, he didn't see him at all. This is a dude who's only, 12 games into his NFL career, and he looks like it, and he looks like a day 3 selection. I mean, he's done well, and a lot of people like to, give a lot of credit to GMs when, late-round picks and undrafted free agents are starting for a team early. But what a lot of people don't realize is they're playing, like, late-round picks and undrafted free agents early. People have been saying, Corey Linsley to the Pro Bowl and things. Like, there's a whole campaign about that Aaron Rodgers started.
Pro Football Focus grades.
Yeah, I mean, he's done good, but, man, like, he doesn't have great drive in the run game because he's very light. I think he's bottom 10% weight when, for centers all time at the Combine, which is saying something. And, he gets messed up on these stunts just because he's green. You know what I mean? He's definitely athletic. He definitely has potential. He definitely, everything pre-snap looks fine. But where he struggles is if you put a big nose tackle in front of him and tell him push him, you got to push him straight, not at an angle, just, drive him. He's going to have issues with that, and if you bring stunts towards those A-gaps, if he's not, looking at the right side, if his assignment is, okay, I need to look here, he doesn't snap his head back and get back balanced and look back to the right once he realizes there's nothing there. I mean, he kind of stalls a little bit, and the dude will just run right by his butt, and it'll just end up in Rodgers' face. That's why I think, if you're messing with Green Bay, that's what I was saying. I was talking to some people on Twitter when they were like, well, what should New England have done then if they weren't going to shade towards Nelson? I'm like, man, just play balanced and just run so many stunts towards that A-gap and just hope and pray, you get something at some point. Because you have to create pressure if you're going to beat Rodgers. I mean, these receivers are too good. That offensive line is decent enough. And, he's willing to extend plays more than anything else. I mean, he'll take a sack if, he also has the chance to throw a bomb. And that's really what he wants to do. So, I mean, it's just hard. I mean, you just got to run stunts on the young player. I mean, that's the only way that I'd say, if you don't have a great guy who can, create pressure, and you're a liability, to get pressure. Just you have to run stunts at the rookie center.
So that's one thing that the Falcons did this past week really well, was they sugared the A-gaps and they actually ran some blitzes through it. The thing is, whenever they ran the blitzes, the Drew Stanton was just dumping it off to a running back. How exactly will the Falcons stop Eddie Lacy in the passing game?
Yeah, a lot of what Lacy does is like I don't know what the call would be for running back because I've never played running back, right? But when you're playing linebacker, you green dog blitz, right? So green dog blitz, if running back's a pass pro, you go at it. If he leaves the backfield, you cover him. It's kind of the same thing with Lacy. So I guess I would say, you have to get at Rodgers in that delay before Lacy's able to make that read and bail. Because a lot of what he does is he just, it's not, you're definitely going to be blocking. It's, okay, you have a blocking assignment first. If no one comes, bail. And you just go find space. And he made a huge catch against, I want to say Minnesota, I believe it was, 2 weeks ago, where, Rodgers just had time, was looking, found Lacy on a little dump off, and no one was within like 20 yards. He ended up breaking through like 4 tackles and got a touchdown. So, I mean, yeah, you got to get a body on him. I mean, the thing about Lacy is Lacy's not going to deliver punishment like Marshawn Lynch. A lot of people like to bring up Marshawn Lynch when talking about Lacy. I don't think he's that level. I mean, Marshawn hurts people. Lacy sustains hits. You know what I mean? Lacy's just very large, and he has balance. So it's hard to bring him down. But Marshawn Lynch is trucking people. Lacy's not trucking people.
Lacy is very large. Weighs he listed at 230. I think he's probably about 2 sandwiches shy of 250.
He reminds me more of Michael Turner.
Definitely, yeah. I never really got the Marshawn Lynch comparisons, to be honest, because I never thought he ran that aggressive. I mean, as much as people, like to talk about Trent Richardson, I mean, I feel like Trent Richardson ran with more of a purpose to deliver punishment than Eddie Lacy did.
I'd agree with that one.
Yeah.
But Eddie Lacy is still a better...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, I'm not trading Lacy for Trent Richardson. No. It's not happening.
Yeah, because once Richardson got to the pros, his aggression went from here to about there.
Yeah.
Oh, he runs hard for that 1 yard that he gets. It's the hardest 1 yard gain you'll ever see.
Oh man, you want to talk about hard 1 yard runs? You'll see Lacy in these shotgun toss sweeps, and he'll run like 15 yards, trucking through 4 people to get like a half a centimeter. Like he's just not getting negative yardage.
Not gonna lie, Atlanta's run blocking hasn't exactly helped Steven Jackson with any favors.
Yeah, that's true. It always seems to be that one missed assignment that just like prevents Steven Jackson from getting to that second level where he can do a lot of damage.
Which the Falcons made those assignments a couple times this week, and Jackson had some good runs, and then he had some runs that were 3rd and 1, and he gained nothing because he got hit in the backfield.
Yeah. Well, they hit those assignments occasionally now that James Stone is the center. They never hit those assignments when Peter Kahn's was the center because Peter Kahn is probably the worst second-level blocker I have ever seen play a professional football game.
They hit him with Hawley when he was the center.
Yeah.
And Hawley had 2 very good blocks on pull blocks. One was a Antone Smith run for like 55 yards or 48 yards or something crazy like that. The other was on a Steven Jackson run earlier in the year where he had, I want to say, 17 or 18 yards in the first game against the Saints. It was an outside run, block, and then a pull. And then he also had the same kind of block on a pull near the goal line.
Yeah. Yeah. Jackson could definitely do some damage if he gets to the second level against the Packers.
Man, he'll be meeting HaHa Clint Dix, who only goes for ankles, and Morgan Burnett, who just gets blown up. Morgan Burnett got absolutely trucked last week, just destroyed. He's definitely a liability in the run game. if you guys can make, force these safeties to make a tackle on Steven Jackson, it's game over. It's game over on that play.
Yeah, I noticed Blunt was just off to the. Yeah. All right, Scott, you want to jump into some of these mailbag questions? We got a bunch.
We do.
All right, Justis. Let's get to one that you can help us answer. Andrew Shawwaller asked us two, but one of them is, you think there's really a good chance that the Packers let Cobb go?
Yeah, I think so. They have the 7th most money tied up to 2015 already. Getting rid of A.J. Hawk and Brad Jones, who are really the only two guys that, they can get rid of and, get money back next season would save them about $4 million. But they still have to pay, Brian Bulaga. They still have to pay either Tramon Williams or Devon House as a starting cornerback. They have B.J. Raji's coming off the books. The Troy Guyon's coming off the books, so they will have no nose tackle. They'll have a missing boundary corner. They'll have a missing right tackle. It almost comes down to a decision of, do we want Randall Cobb or do we want the rest of the team back? And even though they're not premier guys, I still think, Green Bay has shown the ability to develop receivers. They've shown the ability to recognize the talent of receivers. I mean, even Charles Johnson, who they drafted in the 7th round a couple of years ago, he's about to be like the number 1 receiver in Minnesota now, after bouncing around from a couple teams. They're about to have Jared Abbrederis come off of IR next year, Jeff Janis come off the bench, possibly Jarrett Boykin, who's another free agent receiver. He was a 3rd receiver last year, and he was the 3rd receiver to start this season. And they have another receiver who was drafted in the 7th round last year out of the University of Maryland. So it's not like they're missing wide receiver bodies that they could develop at the bottom end of the roster. I guess their hope would just be, I hope one of these guys develops into a receiver, like a 3rd receiver, because if not, then we're going to end up rolling out with Jarrett Boykin. But even then, that's not that bad. I mean, they did that for, 18 games, I want to say, over the past 2 years, so I don't think that's something super stressful. At the end of the day, I just think, Cobb is going to make a significant amount of money when he hits the open market, especially with teams like Cleveland, teams like Oakland, teams like Jacksonville, who need more receivers with all this cash to spend. You know what I mean? And I was told that they're not going to use a tag on him. Flat out, they're just not going to use a tag on him. So, I just think if he hits the open market, I mean, these guys on their 2nd contracts, and I don't blame them at all. I mean, get your money. They go for the dollar signs, and I just don't think that they're going to be there in Green Bay.
Cleveland would be a great spot for him.
Yeah. Oh, my God. He's going to make so much. He's going to make a fan base very, very happy. I wish him the best in Cleveland or Oakland.
Where he's going to have 1,200 yards and 8 touchdowns his first season there. And people are going to be like, man, if only we had a quarterback. Or if it's Oakland, they're going to be like, man, if only we had a number 2 receiver and a tight end.
Or defense, or pretty much everything else.
They've got a crap ton of money in Oakland, though. I think they're going to have cap space starts with an 8 this year. It's either 82 or 84 million. I forget what it was when I calculated it. But if Oakland wants a player, really wants a player, they could go out and get him like that.
Yeah, I was told that they're legitimately thinking about Sue, which is one reason. I've had some people in the industry talk to me when I was like, so Oakland picks number 1. They're picking Leonard Williams, right? I mean, not to get too much into the draft, but it's there's really 3 guys, and Mariota, they just drafted Carr. And, Gregory, they just drafted Mack. I mean, it had to be Leonard Williams, right? And they're just like, well, you know how much money they have to spend? Ndamukong Suh's coming off these books, this next offseason? Watch for that one. So I guess that's something to keep an eye on.
If they want to run a legitimate 3-4, they could still get Leonard Williams and Suh and have Ellis in the middle and have a really good 3-man, 3-4 lineup. Have Suh at 5, Leonard Williams at a 5, have Ellis in the middle. You could even run it unbalanced either way and have some fun with it. I would do that. And they've got Antonio Smith, so it's not like they don't have the ability And it's not like Justin Tuck can't line up at a defensive end, outside linebacker style role. They really just need a pass rusher on the outside to go with Khalil Mack and C.O. Moore, or just a monster inside guy to go with them.
Yeah. They just need that's the thing is people are like, man, no one on that that front seven is terrible, but they just need like another guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They just need a guy who like sets it off. And if they got Williams and Sue, they could run a great rotation. And if they got a guy in the middle at middle linebacker to basically take over for Miles Burris, because Miles Burris isn't good. He's your backup.
Right.
So, I don't know. Oh, this is the Falcons podcast, but we are talking about Oakland because, well.
All right, let's get back. All right, Jim asks, any thoughts on Zeke Mata since he was ahead of Ishmael on the depth chart last year?
I don't know if Zeke Mata ever plays football again because of his neck injury. If it takes you out of 4 games 1 year and then you're still not able to play the very next year, even after having surgery, going through rehab, all that, I don't know if Zeke Mata ever plays another down. Just because that kind of neck injury, like, it's a spinal bone right up here. You're always going to feel that risk of going out there and playing and like, hey, can I break it again? That being said, if Zeke Mata did come back, I'd want him to come back as a linebacker. I'd want him to bulk up a little bit, get to about 225, be a coverage linebacker, and I think he'd do a good job because he plays the run extremely well. And I think if the Falcons did use him at linebacker, it'd be in that nickel or that 4-3 package, and he could be that coverage linebacker that allows Warlow to come up and blitz, or Warlow to play that down low flat, which is where he's good in coverage, as opposed to having him play deep over the middle where he's awful in coverage. Play a defense where guys win. If Zeke Mata comes back and he's healthy, having him be that Coy Wire style linebacker is probably the best way to do it.
Yeah, I would agree with Scott. I don't think he's going to come back and play football. I think he's too much of a medical risk. That's why he's not playing this year. But I do agree if he did come back, you kind of try to bulk him up, and Coy Wire is a good comparison. I think he'd probably be more of a poor man's Coy Wire because I think Mata's a little tighter in the hips than what Coy Wire was. But, maybe. We'll see, hopefully.
I mean, at linebacker, it's okay if you're a little bit tighter in your hips than at safety.
Yeah. I'm just saying I don't think he would be as good as Coy Wire was when, a couple of years ago when Coy Wire was basically our nickel linebacker.
True. Plus, the Falcons are getting back Marcus Sproul next year. They are getting back maybe Sean Weatherspoon if he re-signs. Although I'm kind of doubting at this point that he re-signs, but they are going to get him back, so if he re-signs.
I think he'll re-sign.
I don't know why he re-sign, if he gets more money elsewhere, but Atlanta's got the money to keep him. So.
Falcons fan Chicago asks, if the Falcons win the NFC South and beat, say, Detroit in the first round and show well in the divisional game, does Mike Smith keep the job?
I'm going to sound like a flip-flopper here, to use a political term. Okay. But I think that is how Mike Smith would keep his job. Even if Atlanta goes 7-9, wins the NFC South, beats Detroit at home, say they lose by 3 in the divisional game because of a last-second, miracle touchdown, that would be how Smith keeps his job. Unless it's a typical, oh, hey, they lost that second playoff game because of a Mike Smith error. That's typical of Mike Smith. Unless it's that kind of situation, I see him keeping his job if they win the NFC South. If they don't win the NFC South, if they don't make the playoffs, Mike Smith is fired. Period. End of story.
Yeah. I would say if they win a playoff game, he's going to keep his job. I just can't imagine, the scenario where they get beat to the level that they need to get beat in the second round of the playoffs to get him fired. But, he asked the question if they show well in divisional game. In that circumstance, yeah, then I think he keeps his job.
Yeah, I mean, in that kind of situation, he definitely keeps his job, and then you go, what's the biggest issue on this team? Pass rush. And you just go out, you sign a pass rusher, whoever you can get, whether it's JPP, Justin Houston. One of those guys is going to be available. Throw a truck full of money at him. Make sure you re-sign that Bryant. Make sure you draft a guy in the first round like a Shane Ray or Vic Beasley. There's like 8 different pass rushers. You can go in the first round, and you can't go wrong unless it's Hiloi Kikaha, a name I can't ever pronounce. Because that guy is just Jarvis Jones Part 2, and I'm not a fan of his. Or that double O guy that I can't pronounce either. I don't think he's a first-round player.
Oh, Mabio DeGazoa? I played against him in high school. It's nice to see him. But,
double O.
Both of those guys have issues. I mean, Owa had his hip reconstructed twice before he could even play at UCLA.
That's why I don't think he's a first-round prospect.
It's the same thing with Ho'oli Kikaha. I mean, Ho'oli Kikaha has had 2 knee surgeries already. Yeah, I mean, definitely some concerns there for guys that play speed positions.
Those 2 guys I wouldn't touch in the first 3 rounds. Because, one, injury history, tired of getting burned on injury histories, like Sean Weatherspoon and Julio Jones and Sam Baker. Tired of getting burned on those. And then the second thing that I don't think they're great players. I don't think they're first-round players. But if you get like a Vic Beasley and you throw him in there with Jonathan Massaquoi and like Justin Houston, and you just rotate those 3 guys over and over and over again, hell yeah, give me that pass rush all day long. Throw in Anga, I'll be happy. Throw in some Tyler Starr maybe a little bit. Hey, I'm cool with that. Especially if Tyler Starr develops into something that's not Bierman but better than Bierman. So yeah, I do think that Smith would keep his job. I do think that Nolan would keep his job unless Rex Ryan would take the defensive coordinator spot. And if Rex Ryan, for whatever reason, will take that defensive coordinator spot for Mike Smith, that's the only way I could see Mike Nolan losing his job. Atlanta would switch to a full-on 4-3, or not full-on 4-3, full-on 3-4, and you would definitely have defensive linemen playing in their right spots. I'll put it that way.
Okay. A box of cookies, Devontae Hughes asked, do y'all think Nolan will use more bench guys for the pass rush? For example, Stanley Mapanga.
I think he's going to have to because OC's old and Bierman's old, and at this point you kind of have to because Mapanga's even going to get hurt, which brings me to another thought of Cliff Matthews. If Mapanga is legitimately hurt, that's who you deactivate. You have Cliff Matthews come up and let him play. I mean, Matthews has been the surprising one more than Mapanga. I'd have Matthews and Massaquoi and have those guys come in and just go after the quarterback because I'm tired of seeing Troy Bierman get stood up at the line. Bierman should be a rotational guy at best. He should play 30% of the snaps at most. Yet he's playing like 80% of the snaps and taking away good snaps from players like Jonathan Massaquoi, Stanley Mapanga, Malachi Goodman, and he shouldn't be taking those snaps. So I do think Nolan should use more bench guys, and that bench guy should be Jonathan Massaquoi, who should be starting.
I will say, sure. As for Mapanga specifically, I think his it looked like he had a dislocated elbow, which usually can be a season-ending injury depending on how bad it is, or he could be out for a month. So it doesn't look like a strong possibility that he'll play, but we'll get an update later this week, I guess, on that. This is an issue that Scott and I have talked about on the show multiple times since week 2 when we were talking about how we need to get Mapanga and Massaquoi more snaps. So if it happens now, what are we in week 13? Okay, great. This should have happened 11 weeks ago, but.
Hey, but if it happens now, going into a playoff push, and these guys are fresh, I'll take it.
Yeah.
I'll absolutely take it, especially if Massaquoi goes off with 2 sacks a game to finish the season. I'll take it. Just get me pass rush, however you do it. I don't care whether it's blitzing safeties all the time, throwing in, Massaquoi, throwing in, Goodman or help activating Tyler Starr or Cliff Matthews. I don't care how you do it. Just get a pass rush. Get it this week. Keep it for however many games you play for the rest of the season. And then in the offseason, make it priority number one to get a dominant edge rusher, a guy to rotate in with Massaquoi, and then have Massaquoi learn his role in the defense in a 3-4 defense.
Okay. Smorgasbord 9 asks, would you rather the Falcons win the South and keep Smitty or lose out to ensure a new staff?
Again, this one's tough. I want to see the Falcons win. I don't care who the coach is. I don't care. As long as they win, it could be Dan Reeves in their coaching. And I despised Dan Reeves, despite what he did for the Falcons in '98. I thought he was the worst coach they could have had. So, do I care if it's Smitty? Honestly, I'd kind of like to see the guy who brought them up to prominence help them take that next step and become a Super Bowl champion. So, I'd like for Smitty just to do some self-evaluation and figure out what he's screwing up and fix it. That's what I'd like to see. Because I'd like to see him keep his job because he is the winningest coach in Falcons history. And, yeah. But since all the same issues he's always had in Atlanta have never changed, I do think that you would have to fire Smitty if the Falcons don't win the South.
You can say the same thing about Andy Reid, though, right? Like Andy Reid's issues that he's had, has now, are the same issues that he had, early 2000s Philadelphia. Are you guys willing to move on from that? And would you rather have Rex Ryan over him right now?
Rex Ryan would at least put a foot up Thomas Dimitrov's ass and go, hey, give me a damn pass rusher. Give me 4 of them tomorrow.
That's one thing I was amazed about, just covering the draft. I was just like, all right, so they're going to take, a pass rusher here. Nope. Second round, they're going to take a pass rusher. Nope. Third round, they're going to take a pass rusher. Nope. I'm just like, wait, hold up. You spent all offseason, helping your run defense and just invested nothing in the pass rushing game when you don't really have a, quality pass rusher? I was just amazed by that.
Pass rusher, they just don't play him.
Fire everyone. Fire everyone. I've had it.
I don't think
me and all the other Falcons fans have had it.
I don't think it's an everyone issue. I think it's a Mike Smith issue. I think it's the Falcons have edge rushing talent in guys like Jonathan Massaquoi, in guys like Stanley Mapanga, and they decide not to play them because Mike Smith has to play Osi Umenyiora. He has to play Kroy Bierman. I don't know what naked picture of Mike Smith Kroy Bierman seems to have, but whatever it is the biggest reason why he's playing every week 85% of the snaps. You could give me this whole, he's a potential captain, he's a leader in the locker room crap, but if he's a leader, Mike Peterson was also a leader in the locker room, and he played maybe 20% of the snaps his final year in Atlanta, and it was because he was forced to.
Well, A.J. Hawk was, the leader of the defense after Charles Woodson left. He just got benched last week for a second-year player who was drafted in the 7th round and has really had no experience. So
exactly my point.
If Dom Capers has the balls to make these moves, damn it, Mike Smith, you can do it.
Mike Nolan should do it. He played Tyson Jackson 15 snaps last week, which was, I hate to say it this way, it was refreshing to see. He played him in only obvious rundowns, and then he pulled him off the field, which was great.
Well, that's where you play him, right? That on paper, that's where you want him to play.
Yeah. That's his strength.
Yeah.
He played Jonathan Babineau in 30 pass rushes, which that's Babineau's strength.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
To answer the question that Smorgas asked, would I rather see the Falcons win the South or lose out? I'm personally done with Mike Smith, but it's hard for me to say that I would like to see the Falcons lose out. So I guess, I'd rather see them win the South, but it's not a very enthusiastic choice for me. Dustin Smith asks, is there any chance the Falcons keep the Packers from scoring 50+? There's a chance. There's always a chance.
I'm gonna go with a lot of interceptions.
Yeah.
And it's gonna have to be like Alfred gets one, Trufant gets one, Moore gets one. Rashid Hageman gets like 3 because he puts his hands up, tips it, and catches it. Like, that's what's going to happen. I think you're going to have a lot of Rashid Hageman in there, just kind of going like this in the pocket so that passing lanes are closing up, at least in the pocket.
Rodgers hasn't thrown an interception at home in 2 years. So Rashid Hageman getting 3 interceptions in one game would be impressive. This reminds me of like when I was on Northcote, SB Nation's Viking site. I was on with them with Dusty and Arif, and they were like, "Is there any way we keep Green Bay underscoring like 45 points?" Just like, and then they ended up only scoring like 28 or something. So I was just like, I don't know. So sometimes like Green Bay just made it a point to win with Eddie Lacy against the Vikings for some reason. They're just like, oh, we're not going to use Aaron Rodgers. If they do that, if they just decide not to use Rodgers and just want to make it a point to use Eddie Lacy, I could see it happening.
Or if like the Falcons tip some passes at the line somehow, or there's got to be some way to beat Aaron Rodgers that no one has figured out yet. It could just be as simple as playing contained to his right side or something, but
yeah, just mush rush.
Yeah, like with Michael Vick, the way to stop Michael Vick is you put someone on the left side of the line and you just have him rush and play contain to where he can't get outside of that. Like, that's how they stop Michael Vick. Maybe that's how you have to stop. You got to find the hole in Rodgers' game, the one hole that he might have, and stop him. Maybe if you play matchup zone and you mess with him and you have, like, William Moore playing underneath Umbrella or something. Like, someone's going to have to figure this thing out, but I hope it's Mike Nolan if it's anybody, because I do think the Falcons can keep him from scoring 50+. Now, 40+, I don't know. If you had to, like, give me a guess on the game, I'm picking the Packers to win, like, 35-28, just because I think Atlanta's going to keep their offensive momentum up. I just don't know about their defensive momentum. But if they can somehow have the defense look like it did against Arizona, which I find it very unlikely, but if they can do that, and if they can hold the ball for 37 minutes like they did against Arizona, I could see the Packers scoring, 21, 28 points in that range. If Atlanta holds onto the ball for 37 minutes, that's the Packers offense you're going to get. So I would say play ball control and hope Steven Jackson looks like Steven Jackson of 2 years ago, not Steven Jackson in Atlanta.
Right now, Vegas would have the game at 34-25.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Yeah, 34-25. I can see that. I can see something like that.
Justice, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that the interception streak ends this week. We get 1.
All right. I would
tip ball to William Moore.
I think the law of averages has to catch up to Aaron Rodgers at some point. So
it's going to happen in the playoffs. Somehow we're gonna lose the Seahawks. It just happens, man. The Seahawks, the Niners, the Giants, every single time, man. These guys just heartbreak me. 2 of them aren't making it to the playoffs. I already know. It's just gonna be like this gray cloud dwelling over me until we play the Seahawks, and they just body us in the NFC Championship.
See, this is why I think Atlanta does. I think Atlanta's the team that breaks the streak of interceptions because they've got a lot of guys who are ball hawks. Like, even, again, Aaron's favorite player, Kamal Ishmael, he's a ball hawk. There's no question that he's a ball hawk. He has, 4 interceptions in 6 games started, 7 games started? That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah.
And then you've got Aaron's real favorite player, Dwight Lowery.
Okay, that's better.
And then you've got Alford and Trufant and William Moore, who he may not be an interception machine, but he's a fumble and all sorts of other thing machine. So I think Atlanta can create turnovers. Whether it's interceptions, I don't know, but I think Atlanta's defense, that's their niche right now, turnovers.
Yep. Okay, last question. And as usual, it's Andrew Shawwaller with another long one. He says, I read an article today on Bleacher Report that had the title, Want to Improve the NFL. Hurry up, or something like that. I found the article interesting. To shorten my question, it talked about the Eagles' up-tempo offense. What do you guys think of the Falcons running an offense like them in up-tempo one? Do you believe the players they got could?
I think Atlanta's offense runs better when it's a hurry up, when it's when it's Matt Ryan making the calls at the line, and again, give them 2 calls at every play, have them make the call at the line, whether it's a hurry up, whether it's a huddle, just put the offense in the quarterback's hands. If you have a smart quarterback like an Aaron Rodgers, a Matt Ryan, a Drew Brees, any of those kind of guys, that's how you have the best offenses in the league, is if you trust your quarterback to make the right play.
I would say running the Eagles version of the up-tempo offense, you have to kind of embrace it all the way. You have to run up-tempo practices and OTAs and training camp and throughout the season to get to their level of up-tempo. But I think if I read the same article that Andrew was referring to, I think the Falcons were like 10th in terms of the speed at which they run their offense in terms of seconds of plays or whatever. So it's not as if they don't already run a pretty fast offense considering the no huddle they use. I would say that it's less about personnel, but I would say because the Falcons have a little bit more of the older receivers and they don't have a ton of depth at that position, it probably isn't ideal. You would prefer to have some younger receivers with fresher legs to run the sort of up-tempo that I think Andrew is referring to. So, sure. I mean, yeah, we can get faster. You can certainly get faster, but I don't think it's quite to the Eagles level where you have to basically they do it to just a different level. They have a whole nutrition program to get their players so that they can play at speed for the entire season. So
the Eagles are a different kind of team too. Like Chip Kelly is just a genius, and if the Falcons were able to somehow pry him away from the Eagles, that would be the guy I'd want out of anybody. Because I think his defense is like he's the points per game for his team, the points per game for other teams, total defense, total offense, just overall, he's had a way better team than Atlanta has had the past 2 years.
Yep. All right, folks, that's our show. We appreciate Justis for joining us and bearing with us for that long mailbag questions, but people got a little bit excited this week because the Falcons are actually looking pretty good. People can find Justis' stuff on Bleacher Report. Justis, you write a lot of other stuff. You writing any stuff for any other sites now?
Not right now. Not really until draft season. Just catch my Packers stuff at Bleacher Report.
All right. And Justis' Twitter handle is, I don't know how to say that, J-U Mosq, S-M-O-S-Q. Let's go with that. Yeah. So, and people can follow us on Twitter. I'm at FalcFan. Scott is at Scott Karasek. Hit up the show at Falcons PFC. Be sure to follow PF Central, Pro Football Central. Send in your mailbag questions. We'll be answering those again next week. Use the hashtag Falcons Mailbag, and we'll be able to get to those sooner. So appreciate people joining us for another week, and we look forward to talking with you guys next week.